Well, when this case first came to the attention of the Dayton Police Department and then eventually my office, no one had any idea and simply could not even fathom the extent of the depravity, the wickedness of the 3 defendants who were sentenced today and their treatment of Takoda Collins. You know, it's been described in a very well-written and filed sentencing memorandum by Linda Dodd, who is the Deputy Chief of our Criminal Division. But today, finally, justice has been afforded and obtained for Takoda Collins. Defendant McLean, the victim's father, was sentenced to life imprisonment and will not be eligible for parole until he has served a minimum of 51 years in the penitentiary. Defendant Amanda Hines, McLean's girlfriend and self-proclaimed stepmom, and I'm using that term very loosely, was sentenced to serve at least 22 years in prison, and the defendant Jennifer Ebert, the sister of Hines, was sentenced to serve at least 8 years in the penitentiary. This case shocked and horrified our community. The public's outcry and demand to know how this could have happened caused everyone to take a real hard look and to investigate about how these cases are looked at, how they're investigated, and actually proceed through the system. What we learned was very discouraging. As it became apparent, there were just very many missed opportunities that we could have availed ourselves of that would have saved Takoda. Since that time, my office and I have had meetings with everyone from teachers to caseworkers, law enforcement, to caregivers in an effort to overhaul how child abuse investigations are reported, how they're handled and investigated. We had one goal. Everybody involved was very interested in doing this. But we had one goal, and I had one goal, and that is never, ever let what happened to Takoda Collins happen to any other child in our community. You know, to me, investigations of child abuse in Montgomery County should be the gold standard. We should be able to set the example of how child abuse investigations are handled from everywhere. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're committed to do, and I'm talking about just not me, not just our office, but the law enforcement community, children's services, the schools. That's what we're committed to doing, and that I think we're on a good start on doing that. I suggested many changes that could be made that I believe would greatly enhance these investigations and improve outcomes. Some of those changes are already included in Ohio House Bill 4, which is pending in the Ohio Senate. However, there was no reason to wait. We have already implemented many changes, and we are seeing an increase, actually, in the number of cases and filings being investigated. This year, my Child Protection Unit, which is a unit that is located at Children's Services and that reviews all of these cases, has seen an increase of more than 30% in the number of cases being referred from Children's Services to my office. Now, while I'm certain it isn't a perfect system, it is a vast improvement over how it was done in the past. From this heart-wrenching case, we must commit to ensuring that police, children's services, caregivers, teachers, hospitals, all cooperate and share information concerning at-risk children. And as a community, we all must be concerned about and advocate for our children and the children in our community. See something, say something. It's not enough to suspect or be concerned that a child is in danger or at risk. We all have a responsibility to act. You know, I received many calls in support of prosecuting these defendants and in support of what Linda and John have been doing over the past, now, over a year and a half. One recent call in particular stands out. This is from a woman that called my office, and she had worked for one of the Ohio penitentiaries, and she talked about having worked there and her experience there. And she talked about the irony is, as she said, the irony is that these defendants, especially McLean, will receive better treatment incarcerated in the penal system in Ohio than these 3 defendants gave and treated to Takoda Collins. And that's a damn shame. So hopefully, with the sentencing today, and now that this case has been concluded, I certainly want to thank the Dayton Police Department for their investigation and following through on this. I want to thank certainly my lawyers here for what they have done, John Selane and Linda Dodd, for all the hard work and dedication and commitment they have to this case. Any questions?
Matt, I want to ask you something about something McLean's defense lawyer told me and wrote in his sentencing memo. Michael Bohr told me he did not believe the abuse lasted for years, and in his sentencing memo he wrote, quote, "The story that Al is a monster who abused his son for years is simply false. It is a perception created by the media." Matt, is Al McLean abusing Takoda Collins for years a narrative created by the media?
Well, I know that that Linda Dodd is jumping to be able to answer that question.
The facts and evidence in this case were very clear that McLean did abuse this child for years. When he started in 2015 at Horace Mann, this child was coming home to daily abuse that only got worse. The facts of the case support that it was years of physical abuse that only escalated.
And Matt, also your office last year came out and confirmed the I-team reporting that Parker and I did, which was multiple public agencies that were involved in this child welfare case not communicating as they should have, as they were allowed to under the law, later Oklahoma Code step. You mentioned House Bill 4 that State Rep Phil Plummer has introduced. That's now pending in the state Senate. Do you want to see that become law? Are you in favor of that bill becoming law to prevent, as you said, future tragedies like what happened?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we found, that it's just amazing how the left and right hand were communicating. I mean, we're all in the business of protecting and taking care of our victims in our community, and yet they were not communicating. And there's got to be better communication, and we've already started that. We've started that between the schools and children's services. We also started that between those who make reports of child abuse and what they get back from children's services. And speaking to teachers, I remember a year and a half, 2 years ago, I spoke to a group of about 150 teachers, and their complaint was, we make a recommendation or a report to children's services, we never hear back what happened. We never hear back of what happened to that child. Well, that's unacceptable. And any misconceived idea by children's services that they could not give feedback has now been laid aside. And I made them aware that they have to get back to people who report child abuse and let them know what we're doing about that, whether it's not founded or whether it is founded, and what we're doing to ensure the safety of that child. They have a right to know. The community has a right to know. So we're working on that, and I know that Phil Plummer knows that I fully support what he's doing there, and hopefully that bill will pass quickly.
Did Hines and her sister live at the home with them, and can you talk about how close they were to this whole situation, just to get a little bit of clarity?
Yeah, all 3 defendants lived at that Kensington residence, and all 3 for the entire indictment period and beyond, but our indictment period, which started in 2015. They were all daily in and out of the house. They all had daily interactions with Takoda. They all had a hand in keeping him confined and his abuse, and all 3 of them did.
I asked Linda this, Matt, when McLean and Hines took their plea deals, but now that you've got convictions and all 3 of these people are going to prison now, I'll ask you too. A lot of times in your guys' line of work as prosecutors, you have to be a voice for the voiceless. In this case, Takoda. So what does it mean for your office to get these convictions and these sentences for Takoda?
Well, it's been a long time. And it's been a long time, mainly due to the coronavirus. I mean, the judge has been very proactive about moving this case, and we thank him for that. I think he's been very proactive, Judge Atkins has, in issuing a gag order, which a lot of us may not really like that much. I know the press doesn't, and even as a prosecutor, I don't particularly like it. But I think Judge Atkins was absolutely correct in what he did in ensuring that was going to be a fair administration of justice in this case. However, today is a culmination of that. And today we have seen justice being given to Takoda Collins. And I think it's not only justice for Takoda Collins, but I think it also signals justice for the community. You know, the one thing about this was it's really been an outpouring of, I think, of love and concern for Takoda Collins and what Takoda Collins represents, because he represents all of the children who are mistreated, who are abused and neglected in our community. And I think we have to take that to heart and say, no more. We have to do something about it. So I think today is just a manifestation of, we now have shown that we're going to obtain justice for Takoda Collins and any other victim like Takoda Collins.
Matt, are you able to get into why you guys elected to give these defendants plea deals instead of taking them to trial? I know some voices say that they should not have any eligibility for parole, or at least McLean should have any eligibility for parole.
He was sentenced to 51 years before he even sees a parole officer. He is 32 now. The net effect of this plea is life without parole. Life without parole was never mandatory for the judge. It was always an option if convicted, if charged. I believe that we essentially got there with 51 years to life.
And are you also, I know you kind of talked about this a little bit in the July press conference a little bit ago, last year, but why wasn't the death penalty an option in this case? Because I know Takoda was under 13 years old, so that's one of the stipulations. Why was that not looked at, or was it looked at, and why is it not an option in this case?
Death penalty specifications require certain things, including a purposeful murder. And although there was certainly purposeful torture and intentional torture, there was no evidence that he intended to kill Takoda that day. He just intended to horrifically torture him that day that led to his death. That's why the death penalty wasn't a possibility in this case. And this 51 years to life was.
Judge Atkins.
And let me just add one thing to that. We seriously considered the death penalty and to try to figure any legal way to get around that. But we couldn't, and so we went to the best way we could.
And Judge Atkins specifically called out Children's Services this morning saying that they dropped the ball. Do you believe that's a true and fair statement?
You know, it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback. And I think the time for finger pointing is over with. I think what we have to do now is be proactive, and we have to be positive and say, what can we do to better the system so that something like this never, ever, ever happens again. And so while it's tragic, while it's just unimaginable what this child went through, and not just for a short period of time, over years by these three monsters, okay? I think now it's time that Children's Services, the hospitals, the police, the prosecutors, schools, we all work together, work hand in hand to protect children.
Mr. Heck, can you, first of all, good afternoon to you and your team.
Thank you.
Can you assure moving forward that your do something, say something policy also protects those who come forward with information and protecting the child to make sure that they can be reassured of not being harassed either by the family or surrounding family by doing so?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when someone wants to call in, it can be anonymous, okay? Or they can give their name. And that's very important that people understand that. But if they give their name, if they want response, we're not going to share those names. But we are going to give them a response. Because I think that's, first of all, it's transparency. And we have to do that. And I think it's the only fair thing to do, that people have a right to know that their suspicions, complaint, concern, that is dealt with. And it's not just put in a drawer somewhere or forgotten about. So I want to make sure that people realize that someone's going to get back to them and let them know what's going on. And if they're not, they should let me know. Anything else? Well, I want to tell you, I really do appreciate, I think sometimes the press is not given enough credit for what you all have done. And it just means a lot to us and the community for the way you've reported this case. This has not been an easy case. I know I'm talking to a lot of you here today to report because it does really tug, at the hearts of all of us. But I think you've done just an excellent job of reporting. And it's been tough for you, too, because of the gag order, and we know that. But I just want to thank you for addressing these issues and letting the public know what's happened here, and also calling the task. I mean, that's important, too, and I appreciate what you've all done about that. And just saying, look, there has been some things that should have never happened. There's been things that we need to improve upon, and hopefully that's what we're doing.